Our session today is called Women's Fiction from the Global South. And we have Cecilia Manguerra Brainard, Jessica Zafra, and Ayu Utami. For this session, they will be discussing the quality of their novels through language and how different histories and heritage compose and market their work as distinctly Global South. I will introduce everyone and then we can just proceed, right? So Cecilia Manguerra Brainard is the author and editor of over 22 books with forthcoming translations in Greek, Japanese, Portuguese, Arabic, Slovenian, Macedonian, Azerbaijan, and Serbian. She has earlier translations in Turkish and Finnish. She has received an Outstanding Individual Award from her birth city of Cebu, California Arts Council Fellowship, National Book Award, Cirilo Bautista Prize, travel grants from the U.S. Embassy, and from the National Book Development Board, among others. She runs a small press, PALH, or Philippine American Literary House. Everyone, please give a hand for Cecilia Brainard. Our second speaker is Jessica Zafra. She has published a novel, The Age of Umbrage, 3 short story collections, and the Twisted series of books on travel and popular culture. She has presented television shows and web series, hosted radio talk shows, and written and produced feature films. Her second novel is being adapted for film. Everyone, Jessica Zafra. Ayu Utami is one of the most prominent representatives of a new generation of Indonesian writers who openly address the social and cultural conflicts of the island state, and today accompany the transition to democracy with a critical voice. While still studying Russian language and literature at the Universitas Indonesia in Jakarta, Utami began publishing reports and essays in various newspapers. She is a prize-winning novelist whose novels have been translated into Dutch and several other languages. A co-founder of the Indonesian Alliance of Independent Journalists, Utami also works for the independent radio station 68H and the cultural center Komunitas Utan Kayu. She lives in Jakarta. Everyone, Ayu. So to start our session today will be Miss Cecilia. Please take your microphone. Yes, thank you.
And, you can hear me. It's good. I actually wrote something. I've been here since the 12th and I've been jet lagged and I'm waking up at 3 in the morning, but I'll try to do without this. Basically, what I wanted to share with you is to let you know who I am and what I write about and give you some idea of why I write the way I write. So first, I must let you know that last year I was here and fortunately I hooked up with an agent, Senja Pozar, and within a year she secured 14 translations. So that's why I'm sort of excited about the 14 translations. And we will be celebrating that tomorrow, and I'll let you know about it. I wear many hats. So I am a writer, I am also an editor, and I also run a small press. Perhaps my claim to fame is being a fiction writer, even though I do all these other things. I come from the south of the Philippines, so that's like double south, global south, called Cebu. And you may have heard about it. We just had a god-awful earthquake. My family's fine, but just so you have an idea where I'm coming from. So even though I live in California since 1969, all this time, except for the pandemic, I have always visited the Philippines and Cebu regularly. When I started writing, Cebu became Ubek. CEBU became UBEC because it was easier to write fiction and lie if it was Ubek. Otherwise, historians come up to me and say, wait, that church does not belong there, or, that street is wrong. So I draw a lot from not just Cebu and its people and its culture and its history, but also family history. My mother's family had been there. I have paper documents from like 1800s. And so we were always, growing up, we were always taught to be proud of being Cebuano. This is called Cebuano roots. And so in many stories I have drawn from my family. So not surprisingly, my mother and my father are in my first novel. My great-grandmother became the inspiration for my third novel. And so they are set generally in Ubek, not all the time. I do write stories also that are set in anywhere in the world. I just have to be fascinated with the character. So I'm just sharing, and I'll talk a little bit about them. So my first novel was When the Rainbow Goddess Wept, and that was inspired. There's a coming-of-age story of a young girl during World War II. And it was inspired by stories from my parents who lived through that war. It's fiction. And my second novel is Magdalena, and that also draws from this place that I come from. And it involves stories of three generations of Filipino women that had to deal with wars. The Philippines is an interesting place. We're always in and out of wars if you look back at its history. And my third novel, The Newspaper Widow. Now this is kind of an interesting one because this was going to be my fun, not necessarily literary novel, and I was just going to write a murder mystery, but it is described as a literary mystery. This was inspired by my great-grandmother, who was also from Cebu, who was the first woman publisher in the Philippines. So, and then my selected short stories includes 39 of what I think are my best short stories. I guess in a nutshell, that's sort of, I have more books than that, but these were the ones that were translated, and I thought that I would just sort of talk about. I think probably I will just stop there. I think we were planning on having Q&A or further discussion. So I will just end it there, and then we can talk some more. So Jessica?
Hello, I'm Jessica. So The Age of Umbrage is my first novel, which I finally wrote after decades of trying. But I've always wanted to write novels. It's just that after I left school, I realized I would have to make a living. And in Manila, making a living as a novelist is a tough proposition. And the rent must be paid and the cat food must be bought. So I took on a lot of jobs. So if you look at my resume, a lot of it is very random stuff. As in, I've hosted radio talk shows, TV talk shows, I've worked in the movies, I produced the loveliest movie, etc. But I'm perhaps best known for a column I wrote in a newspaper in the 90s called Twisted. And that column, I know that I owe it, whatever reputation I have in Manila, I owe to that column because it had a bit of a following, as in because it was angry and also funny. Because I was a miserable teenager and I became an angry adult, and it's if you're an angry person, you don't also want to write angry prose because your head will explode. So I tried to deal with it by writing funny prose. So people still associate me with Twisted, and to this day, I'm walking around Manila, which is mostly malls, and people will stop and say, "Do you still write?" And if I'm in a bad mood, I'll say, "What the hell else am I supposed to do?" Because you don't stop writing just because your column doesn't appear in the papers anymore. But then say around the mid 2010s, that as you get older, you get to the age where when you have to fill up a form and it says age, you have to stop and do a little subtraction. And then when the result comes out, you say, this cannot be right. Short of, finding your birth certificate and proving it wrong. But then I realized, oh my God, I've hit this advanced age and I have not written a novel, which is the only thing I've really wanted to write. And I realized that there are people who can write columns as a day job and then write the novel on their own time. I realized I am not one of those people. I have to, it's a whole different mindset. Writing columns that are 800 to 1,000 words long and writing a novel that's 200 pages. So I realized I would have to stop writing the shorter works and concentrate on writing a novel. And the advantage of having written 3 columns a day for many years is that I've learned to write very fast. And so the novel was finished fairly fast, but then I had to quit writing columns and so on. And so this is my life now. I write novels and explain to people, I don't write Twisted anymore. I write novels. And so, but it's very similar to Twisted in that many of the things that that characterized my column are also in the novel. For instance, plenty of popular culture references, because I don't have much of a life. It's all vicarious. It's all books, movies, stories of other people. So I used that. And then also things that I had written about in a column, things that interested me, like the Filipino diaspora. All the Filipinos who work abroad. At one point, I edited a magazine called Flip, the official organ of world domination, because one of the most popular columns I ever wrote was about something called world domination theory, in which I said, and this is joking, but I said it jokingly, but people did take it seriously, that given the number of domestic helpers from the Philippines who work abroad and work for the rich and powerful, if at a given signal they go on strike, the world will stop. As in, all the presidents of the world, all the bankers of the world, they all have Filipino staff. So, a coordinated labor strike, and the world will stop, and, we can make demands, and the Philippines will take over the world. And so I was thinking of that, and I factored that into my novel. And so a lot of other things, the fact mail order brides are a reality, and how a lot of Filipino women are looking for foreigners to marry because it's not just economic opportunity, but good-looking mestizo children who can get into show business, that kind of thing. So that factored into my novel. And so my novel was published in 2020, and this year it has been translated into German. So the English title is The Age of Umbrage. The German title is A Pretty Bad Girl. So I don't know where that came from, but I guess the interpretation of the translator was that, well, she's kind of a pretty bad girl in that she does not follow the path that is set out for her. So there. So I hope to have more useful things to say in the Q&A with the audience. Thank you very much.
Yeah, hello, thank you. I'm very happy to be among the Filipinos and becoming the part of the Filipinos. And because Indonesian in my generation, we learn at school at least the names of Jose Rizal and the title of his book. which for Indonesian, unless they have a Catholic background like me, it's very difficult to pronounce. Noli me tangere is it's very difficult to pronounce for most Indonesian, but my students in my generation, we know that. So I'm very happy to be here. And many parents in Indonesia, inspired by Jose Rizal, and give their children name Jose Rizal. There is a famous actor, theater actor in Indonesia named Jose Rizal Manuel. So we used to have this connection, and I hope that we will have strengthen the connection again. Regarding my position here, and I think we all know Global South. We're talking about the women's Global South women writers, and we know that these categories were not there during the Cold War. In the past, we used First World and Third World, and the Second World never used the title, the term. So it's a very hierarchical Western categories, and now we use the term the Global South. But actually, what we share within the Global South that probably we can share experience through literature is that most of the Global South came with a middle or low income, less democratic, struggling with corruption. I think that's what we share in the Global South, except also the resilience. The colonial history cannot be erased as it defined the form of the state and the structure of the society. I think it is also very clear in the Filipina. And this also, I mean, the colonial history also defined the modern literature. I think this is also the fact in Indonesia and also in the other Southeast Asian countries. And why I start with this, because then I want to show that I'm part of this tradition. In Indonesia, the modern literature is heavily political since the beginning. It's not only yesterday I came in one of the session, very interesting session by Patricia May Hurilia, yeah. Very interesting because she told about the literary works during the I think during the colonial time. But in Indonesia, if you have Rizal, the contemporaneous to Rizal in Indonesia is Kartini. Kartini is a woman. She is part of this aristocracy in Java. Like Rizal, she is very, very critical to colonialism without becoming too radicals as wanting to eradicate the Dutch or the white. But she wrote some short stories, but she was more famous because of her letters. And she became, I think we celebrate the first writers in Indonesia is a woman, and happy for that, and she's also celebrated as the hero for emancipation in Indonesia. Now I was born 1 century after the period of Rizal and Kartini, but I think I belong to the tradition to write a very political novels. In fact, that I started not as a novelist, I started as a journalist, but during the military regime. And I became an activist for press freedom at that time, and I was sacked from my office because of the government's intimidation. I could no longer work as a journalist, so I started to write novel. So the reason that I started to write novel is very political too. So I'm part of this tradition in Indonesia where writers novelists are very political, and at that time it was the period in which we have this jargon: when the press is silenced, literature speaks. That was from the early period of my writing. But as a woman, at that time, I write my first novel was a book. It initially I want to write about women. The initial characters are 4 women, but the end of the final form of the works becomes like it has a male character that appears without me planning it. So this is also the mysterious part of writing a novel. You plan other things and it ends up with different things. It's about a Catholic priest who were inspired by the theology of liberation, which is a new ideas in the 1970s to 80s, and it influenced the global South. But as a woman, I think we had to face the double pressure, both in public and in private, cultural and political. And that's why sexuality is part of my main issue in my earlier period. Because sexuality is where the private meets the public or the political, and the most intimate meet the impersonal. And I was known for breaking the taboos in my country, writing about so many things. And after at that time it was a success. It was like a commercial success, but also a success with other things like opening horizon. And then publishers, we are talking about the early 2000s, publishers in Indonesia seeking for new women writers. And it becomes a kind of trend, women writers at that time. But then that was my early period. My later period, since Indonesia had moved to democracy, I began to drop the stories about the dramatic or action stories regarding the military violence, the kidnapping of activists. So I started to drop that because it becomes marketable. I mean, it becomes like a thrill. People liked it because of the action, the tension. And I don't feel it, for me, it's something wrong. If you started to like violence or it becomes a sensation. So I started to drop that kind of dramatic. And my later period of works, I explored the rather ordinary stories of everyday life. I explore subtle stories, finding connection between ordinary things with grand narratives, and trying to find common meanings in from personal stories. And by the way, also, I know in Indonesia you cannot. It's difficult to work to make money from a novels. I mean, for a long time, you can probably have it. You can probably do it for 10 years, but then the trend will change. So I don't want to depend my life on my books because I love books. I love writing, and I don't want to do it as my profession. I also lead a festival, literary festival, and usually I also involve this connecting personal stories with grand narratives, stories of a nation. Actually, if I think I finished my time, because actually, okay, thank you. Because actually, I want to read some excerpt from my book, but we can do it later. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, now we have time for questions or comments. But if you would like her to read an excerpt from her book, it's a good time to start as well.
May I point out
Yes,
something
go ahead.
that Ms. Brainard and I have. So Ayu mentioned about
Yeah.
how she was a journalist, and then she was stopped from practicing journalism, so she went into novels, and you can't help it. It's political. So when you set out to write a novel, were you thinking, I'm going to have politics in this? Because in my case, I did not sit down to write a political novel, but if you're writing a novel about the Philippines, you can't help it. It just seeps into the material.
I'll try and answer that. When I write, the focus is on character, but my characters are in a particular place in a specific time. So if they are around during the Duterte time, or they will have to respond to what is going on around them. And so then that's when that political side comes in, because they have to function within that world. Although the intent was not I am going to write the most important revolutionary story or whatever it is.
Yes, and in my case, so I really did not think politics would factor into my novel. But then, this is a martial law baby. She was born during the Marcos regime, and my novel is set in the last days of disco, being the Marcos regime. And so everything that is happening around her is connected to politics. So you can't help it. If you write a novel set in the global south at a particular point of history, then it becomes political. And also, the fact of it being, of the character being a woman, being a young girl, sex will find its way into it, because sexual politics is something that every woman will have to navigate. Whether she has no choice, she will do it.
Yeah, I totally agree that politics is actually the horizon. I mean, we are in our context. So every truthful, every honest novel will find the political connection in one way or the other way around. But you can also change. You can also choose not to talk about politics. I mean, I know in certain, especially in a military regime when censorship was strong, some writer decided. I mean, if you are not decided, usually it becomes political. But a writer can also choose not to touch certain issues on politics.
I think that selecting what you comment on or what enters into your novels is an important decision that writers make. How do you make these decisions?
The decision again. I write. My characters kind of dictate my story, and so I follow them. And first of all, I try to make them like as I flesh them out so that they are what you call complex characters. And so they try to be as human as possible. I try to make them as human as possible. And so then they function almost like us. And that is what makes them, that's what makes it work, if it's going to work.
Same as Miss Brainard. I start with a character, I develop her, and then that's when I realized that her milieu has a lot to do with how she is. And at the same time, because my background is comic, it's humorous writing. I like to have a target, and face it, stupid rich people are such a rich soft target. And it's easy to write because you have to punch your way up. You cannot make fun of people who have less privilege than you do. On the other hand, the rich are an easy target, and they're almost asking for it. So it was quite easy to write the novel in that there is in a country with so much dire poverty, there is a spectacularly unaware class that that exists here, and benefits from the labor of the people who work for them, and at the same time think that they are sort of benevolent rulers looking down on their minions, and I wanted to shatter that myth.
May I interrupt real quick before IU comes in? I, I just want to quick point out, Jessica and I went to the same school that was run by Belgian nuns who taught us,
Penmanship.
not just penmanship, but who taught us about community service and how to give back to our country and to other people. And I'm hearing that from Jessica, who is younger than me, and I'm just thrilled. The nuns did a good job.
No, because I remember that during the martial law era, our nuns were on the front lines of strikes, which were forbidden. So, I'm always proud to have come from a school whose nuns were activista, also known as tibak.
Yes. I also, well, Indonesia is predominantly Muslim, but I'm a Catholic, and I also go to, of course, as a Catholic, we go to Catholic school. Even the Muslim also went to Catholic school at that time. The Catholic school was at that time, not anymore always, but at that time it was considered some of the best education in Indonesia, and I think my being a feminist also is formed by the nuns. My mother converted to Catholicism because she saw the nuns as giving alternative than family life, than becoming a wife. So for her, for my mother, converting to Catholicism at that time was becoming liberated. Of course, this works for her, not always for others.
Yes.
But that's why I think personal stories is very beautiful stories. And in certain events, you will see the dilemma and the connection with the big political stories. And there are lots of, I think, we will find lots of political context within the very personal story.
Yes, please.
Yeah, so I gather that you live in the USA
Hi.
and you live in Manila. I just Googled you, and I suppose maybe you can say where you
Jakarta.
live. Exactly. I would like to know how important your mother tongue is. What are your mother tongues, respectively? And do you write in your mother tongues? You speak English here. Thank you. We can all understand you. But how important are your mother tongues? And what relationship do you have to English?
Shall I start? My first tongue is Cebuano, so that was the first language that I spoke, and I had to learn English. The Belgian nuns taught me English, and then I also had to learn Tagalog or Filipino, and then we also had a smattering of Spanish, and so this is where that was how I was taught. My grasp of English is, in terms of writing, is much better than my Cebuano, and so I use that in writing. And here's Jessica.
I have been asked in the lead up to this book fair why so many of us write in English. And part of it is because there are so many Filipino languages that sometimes it's just a convenience to write in English. It's easier for us to understand each other. But in my case, there's a socioeconomic background there, because I think my parents insisted that we speak English at home. It only occurred to me a few years ago that this was a social climbing method because they realized that if you are fluent in English, you will have opportunities that would not be open to people who do not speak English. And I find it true because I am proud to say that my portraits of rich people are based on fact. And that's because I speak English, they actually hang out with me because we have a common language. And so it's become an instrument of research.
I write in Indonesian language. We call it Bahasa Indonesia. My mother speaks Javanese. My father also. My father was born as, his mother tongue was Javanese, but then Indonesia became Indonesia, and the language, Indonesian language, became the national language, and we speak basically this is national language. So basically, Indonesians speak Indonesian, and I write in Indonesian. We forgot the Dutch. Bahasa actually means language. So when people in speaking English, they said, "Oh, you speak bahasa." It doesn't mean anything for us. Actually, it means, "Oh, you speak language." So Indonesian language, bahasa Indonesia.
In the Philippines, there are over 130 plus languages. And one of my dreams, actually, is to have all our Filipino written material translated to so many Philippine languages. Of course, now we are getting translated into many languages of the world. But it would be amazing if they could also be read by Filipinos in Cebuano, in Boholano, Ilocano. But that is a function of business, I think. Also, but this because the market would be small, then it might not be viable for some publishers.
So yes, and, sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
So we're talking about mother tongue, and Benedict Anderson, who was very dear to many of us. He pointed out that there's a kind of cultural vertigo that happens when you think about the Philippines. Because for one thing, all our historical documents are the novels of our national hero are in a language that we cannot read. I do not speak Spanish. Noli Me Tangere and El Filibusterismo are in Spanish. And all the documents dating back to the colonial period are in Spanish. And of course, they tried to teach my generation Spanish with 12 units at university level, of which I remember absolutely nothing. Well, buenos dias. There, that's it.
No tengo
So-
dinero.
Yeah, so we actually have to read ourselves in translation. So the fact that we're here in Frankfurt, having had our work translated into German, is another layer of translation that we have to deal with.
I just a little aside, because I've had to deal with 9 foreign publishers. They're actually quite happy that the work is in English, because if it was in any other language, they would have to get it done in English, and then they work on it for some reason. I don't exactly know why. So that was a plus to get it in English.
Indonesia, there are starting some writers write in English. I think because either they're targeting the Indonesian readers who read English, or they're targeting the international market. So it's a choice you can make. Either you want to talk with the very Indonesian market, and I think most of Indonesians still decide to write for Indonesians rather than the international market. And probably it has both good side and bad side. The good side is because we are talking about our own things, and the bad side is that we are rather inward looking.
Yes, please.
I just wanted to add for the German public that, in fact, for Filipinos and many Filipinos, English is not just an official language, it's also the mother tongue, right? So we have multiple mother tongues. And especially for those rich kids, some of my friends who are so-called rich kids, they don't speak Tagalog or Filipino anymore, or never did, because they just grew up with English. So I think it's not that we can't do it in Tagalog. It's among other things, it's a choice, but it's also to reflect this reality that you said is also important. So we reflect the politics, we reflect the realities of life, which includes this language or linguistic reality as well.
Is it about the same? Yeah. Yes.
I think it's also really important to contextualize our extraordinary colonial histories, and that unlike in Indonesia, where the Dutch colonized for over 700 years, right? It is interesting the way that your country has been able to resist the colonization of language. In the Philippines, because we also were not taught Spanish. We were the only colony of Spain we were nothing, right? We were second-class citizens, third-class, fourth-class citizens in the world in many ways. And I think that to Philippine literary artists, visual artists, filmmakers, they've had to, over the decades, fight for their voices, to be able to be heard, and in a way that can resonate, where people aren't just saying, oh, but you're writing in English, oh, but you're speaking in English. And we do come from probably the only country in the world that's been colonized as many times as it has, and that education is atrocious. So, I mean, how does one address these problems internally? And I think that various forms of education are in dire need of, and to celebrate the languages that people can write in and can speak. But we're really challenged, and I kind of wanted to hear more, from the two of you about these challenges that you continue to face, because we're not really that literate of a country right now. Sorry, but I mean, I teach there, and I teach Philippine history too, and people don't know what language to write in, and they cheat using Wikipedia, and that's in English. So it's really problematic. So I just wanted to hear from the two of you. Sorry, but
So we have AI, so that's going to throw another thing in there. So they don't even. So this is very complex, because people really they don't even like to read long things, and thanks to social media, they're used to like short little bites or TikTok kind of things. It's kind of to me it's an issue, and I really suspect that something happens to our brains when we're just used to like working with small bites.
Studies have already shown that an overdependence on technology does affect the quality of one's thinking. And I remember a story about how my friend's kid who is in grade school was asked to write a report on our national hero, Jose Rizal. And because I don't know, I guess kids were too lazy to read or even to go to Wikipedia, which we used to deride, but is now, superior to other forms of information. They went to YouTube and found a video about Jose Rizal, which was full of wrong information, but that was what they repeated in their school report. So, it's always been because the conventional wisdom is that Filipinos don't read, which is in fact not true, because a lot of Filipinos are buying books. Perhaps not the books that I wish that they were buying, but Filipinos do read a lot of books. So I think one of the challenges is to have a stronger critical establishment that will help people to want more from what they're reading, rather than the usual tropes of enemies turning into lovers and whatever, which is so popular now. So I think that a critical audience is only going to work to our advantage as writers, because then we'd have to raise our game in order to meet these critical standards.
Shall we go back to you?
Thank you for all your insights. I thank you very much for writing and letting me read your voice. And I'm not at all, criticizing or anything. I mean, but it's just interesting that, in the Philippines, there would be people who speak one of the 130 indigenous languages, and if a lot of them they're not raising their own voices because they don't, they may not be able to write in English. And both of you keep saying, and when we see it, we know it, and most people who are at the Frankfurt Book Fair from the Global South have reached the level where they speak and write in English, so they can make their voices heard. But a lot of people in the Global South are not making their voices heard, and I'm interested in hearing their voices. I'm a teacher, an English teacher, a politics and economics teacher in Frankfurt. And so I wonder, is there one of the 130 languages where people are also writing and publishing? What efforts can be made to hear those people? He also said, yeah, we criticize together, we laugh, we mock the rich, this wonderful notion that all the Filipino domestic servants could rise up. That's a fantastic image and cause some kind of stop and standstill. But those, a lot of them, well, anyway, back to my question, yeah, how can we hear the voices of all the others?
May I address that? I'll try and address it. I have some thoughts about that because I've had to consider exactly what you're talking about. To me, language is a tool. It's a tool to tell about human conditions, about humanity, about feelings, and so on. And to me, that's where the voice is. If I am successful in using whatever language it is to present to you almost like real human beings when you read my novels, I will have succeeded. That to me is voice, not just the language per se. But having said that, there are really people, academics and other writers who are writing in Cebuano, in different languages. I find that a little bit of a disadvantage because then there are no publishers or very few publishers that do it, and the readership is very limited. So that's my 2 cents worth, or 2 Deutsch, or
I think there is more of an effort currently to publish work in the many languages of the Philippines, Kiniray or Hiligay doon. And now that even literary competitions or have so many categories because there are so many languages and so on. And I was thinking of something that Angel Shaw had written in an art book that we were working on about how we have to decolonize ourselves. And so my question is, how do we decolonize ourselves when we are using the colonizer's language? It's a challenge.
What we write about. Narratives, in a way. Sorry, that's a great question because we are contradictions. I think there's a huge difference between being a contradiction and being a hypocrite. And you are people, you are women from the Global South, in the Global South, who really, really, in many ways, are creating the very narratives that we need more exposure for within the country and globally, because you are actively engaging in decolonization. Decolonization is not a one-time activity, and then you're done. It's a lifetime, right? And oftentimes there's so much slippage that we don't, who knows where we are in that process. I mean, I'll turn the question back to you, and you as well, because I think we all are, as women, also decolonizing. It depends on how you live that condition of colonization, right?
Thank you. And I want to also join this discussion because I think we are born into a certain given situation, and then we have choice to make. Maybe the Philippines using their colonizers' language, and Indonesian doesn't use it because of certain given context. And I think then later we can make a choice. Then it's always a personal choice. But what I want to say is that it's also the problem in Indonesia because we have 100,000 languages and started to disappear because of Indonesian language. So there is an effort to revitalize the language, but it's not that easy because practically, I'm glad that Indonesia is not outward looking in the sense that they put the center outside Indonesia. They want to be read by the international. Now, Indonesia is rather inward, but in a good sense too, because we don't care whether the international market will read us or not. We care about our own readers. Indonesia has big readers. We are like 250 million people. So, I mean, to speak with them is already big enough, and we have a lot of problems. But in other ways, it's Indonesian language internally. It's starting to colonize other languages, and it's also another problem. So there are efforts making literary awards for written in local languages, but there are also efforts mixing the local elements into Indonesian language. So there are different things that we can make. I don't want to blame people who read in English, but I think every individual has their own personal situation and personal choice.
I think that everyone has a truth to write about, right? And a reality to write about. And maybe decolonization means that we write about ourselves, right? And our experiences. And the languages that we use are ours. It may be borrowed from, or it started from somewhere else, but it's ours now. Those languages are ours now. Yeah.
Make it Filipino English. So don't want to be the British or American. Be our own mestizo language. So mix the language.
I cannot remember which Indian writer was talking about it, but it had something to do with using the colonizer's language to fight back. And so this is, I think, something that has been in my head. You use it. It's a tool. And if more people can understand it, as far as I'm concerned, the better, rather than to be struggling to find a publisher and 50 people will read your work or some such thing. But again, it's a matter of choice, as Ayu said. And I believe in the muse. And if the muse comes to you and wants you to write in Kinirai, yes, then you take it. You take what the muse gives you. It's a gift.
Anyone else? I think we've run out of time. He's been flashing the last 5 minutes at me for a while now. Can we end with, sir? Can we have an excerpt reading? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for reminding me.
Well, I don't know. This is a part of a novel, so I don't know if. Okay, actually, okay. This is a story about a boy who happens to be my husband later on. I told you that I'm exploring like very simple stories. Once upon a time, a boy was born. His name was Enrico, after Enrico Caruso. But before we start, let's zoom out so we can take in the global situation at the time. It was the beginning of the Cold War. The capitalist Western Bloc, led by the US, was at war with the Soviet-led Communist Eastern Bloc, and both sides produced arms and fought for control of other countries, including Enrico's home country of Indonesia. Because Indonesia had been colonized and the colonizer were part of the Western Bloc, President Sukarno was more inclined to align with the Eastern Bloc. Let's zoom in and focus on Padang, a small town predominantly Muslim. It is February 15, 1958. I was born at the same time as my twin, the chicken leg PRRI rebellion. This is the first biggest rebellion after independence. We were both children of the revolution, voices demanding freedom. We were voices expressing our dissatisfaction with those in power, but Sukarno made the accusation that my twin was funded by the USA. That was the reason our pure voices were caught up in the intricacies of conspiracy theories. Well, actually, I want to start with this story because we are talking about the Global South, and the story later tell about the Enrico's family, Enrico's mother who converted to Christianity. Strange one. Not the mother, but the grandmother. My mother, on the one hand, was the daughter of the first wife of a trader from Kudus called Saleh Ibrahim. The presence of his second wife was connected with the change of religion of his first wife. Here is how the story went. One day, Sarah, my grandmother, was doing her regular shopping in the market. When she got home, she stored the chilies, onions, and legumes away in the kitchen. And as she was doing that, she came across an advertisement on a piece of paper that had been used to wrap her vegetables. There was a picture of a handsome man with long wavy hair and a beard. He had a sheep by his side and he was carrying a shepherd cane. Written, "Do you want to know Jesus Christ? Contact us at this address." And then she contacted this address and then started the journey to Christianity from the piece of paper that wrapped the vegetables. And later the story, because if you change religion, it's going to be a complicated story in Indonesia sometimes. So yeah, from the personal story, you go to like knowing the situation. And what the funny thing is that later the mother changed from Protestantism to Jehovah's Witness. And the story becomes not dramatic and it becomes funny.
Thank you very much for sharing. Everyone, please hand the clap for our 3 women authors. Thank you very much for sharing. And thank you all for being here.